everyone. I'm Barbie Atienza. I'll be your host and moderator. And I'm quite excited for this interview today because we are going to talk about the Global Gold Monetary Fund. Yes, you heard that right. Gold Monetary Fund. In the 21st century, it's 2023, remember? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about, the Global Gold Monetary Fund. And to go deep dive into this topic, we are going to have a three-part series to discuss this thoroughly. And also to help us out in this discussion is our resource speaker, who happens to be one of the founders of the Global Gold Monetary Fund, and is also a financial engineering expert, and I must say, a faithful servant of God. So welcome to this interview, sir, Joseph Alain Laferna de la Motte.
Thank you,
Good
sir.
day to you, sir.
Thank you.
Bonjour.
Et je vous en prie, bonjour.
And welcome to Manila.
Merci.
And how did you find Manila so far?
Wonderful.
How long
Everybody
have you been
smiles. Everybody is happy. It's just a pleasure.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I hope you do enjoy the rest of your stay here. So if you're ready, Alain, let me shoot the first question just to break the ice. And first up, what's your, as a financial engineering expert, what's your view about the current global monetary system? How is it doing?
Well, it's a very complex subject. It's multifaceted. And it begins with, I mean, the bigger picture, if you want, of what I can share, is that what I see coming is a global systemic collapse of the entire global monetary system.
Mm-hmm. That bad?
It's that bad. There is no, you cannot put band-aids on an artery that has been severed, okay? It's a foolishness to try and put a band-aid on it. And so what we're facing today is a total collapse of the entire global monetary system, because they can continue to create more and more and more money. And what you have is very few people really understand that it's actually money. You have to go back to what is money. Mm-hmm. And when you go back to what is money and you understand how money is created, it's created out of thin air. There's nothing behind it. It's based on the faith of a government and the credit of a government. Mm-hmm. So if people have faith in a government and faith in the currency, it will thrive. The moment that the music stops and everybody says, wait a minute, it's worthless, it's collapsing, it will collapse. It's a little bit the story of the child that says the emperor has no clothes. Mm-hmm. Okay, mm-hmm. It took a little child, and everybody believed that he had a magnificent invisible cloth. Mm-hmm. You know.
Tell us how does the system work today?
You have to understand that there are some foundational pillars to the current monetary system, and one of those pillars is what I would call fractional reserve banking.
Fractional reserve banking.
Yes. The other one is compounded interest. Uh-huh. And the third one would be basically the leverage that we can apply to all of this. Okay? And the compounding of leverage on top of that. So you've got all of these that are interacting and in order to create a problem that has become, they've created a monster that is bigger than they can control right now. Mm-hmm. And so what you have is a system that is, it is falling apart at the seams, and it's because we've put patchwork over patchwork over patchwork to try and solve the problem, but it doesn't solve anything.
All palliatives.
Yeah, all palliatives. We're just kicking the can down the road so that the next administration, the next government will take the fall, and they will come out, smelling like roses during their time here. Mm. The problem is, it's the next generations that will pay the price, unless we deal with it today. The reason I'm interested in this is because my children, my grandchildren, and so should all of us. We should really think about what are we leaving behind. Mm-hmm. The problem with systemic collapse is that when you understand that fractional reserve banking is a system of banking that has been invented, it is a no more, no less than technically a Ponzi scheme, in my opinion, because it is creating money that is illusionary.
Not there.
Not there. I will explain what I mean by that. Mm-hmm. Under the concept of fractional banking, there used to be, let's take the world reserve currency, the US dollar. It used to be that if a bank has $10 of reserve on its balance sheet,
Right.
they can create and lend out $100. Okay?
Okay.
Now it's a little more complex than that. There is tier 1 capital,
Just to
tier 2
simplify it.
capital, and so on. But the point is this, that they can now lend out more than what they have in reserve. Okay. That's great until if everybody pays their bills and everything is good. But when things begin to unravel, you have a problem, because especially
There's no real value there.
there's no value behind it. And so what it actually means is this. If a bank can take $10 and issue 100, which they can lend out, then you have a problem where if the collapse happens, where do they get the money to pay back?
Yeah.
They don't have it. Okay, it's been created out of thin air. So the only way you can sustain that system is to create more money. So what you have is you have a problem here, and then the problem gets bigger. So you've got everything is falling apart. So you make the pie bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and ultimately it will collapse.
Because that's all purely discretionary. Just
Well, yes.
making the value out of
Yes.
nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And when all of us around the table who have agreed that this has value, all of a sudden we say no more, we don't buy this anymore, we have a problem. And so this is what you're facing today. So what we have to also understand is that behind this very complex structure of a monetary system, that's actually very dangerous. I think we're in a very dangerous zone right now. You have an agenda of these people. The agenda is not money. The agenda is control.
Control.
Control. Control. It's all about power and control of a people.
Power.
It's about indenturing people and nations in order to make them servants. That's the heart of the entire thing. You understand that, you understand everything else.
Systematic slavery.
Absolutely. The Bible says the rich will rule over the poor, and the borrower will be servant to the lender.
Right.
You understand that? You understand the whole global monetary system.
And this is a system that is not in accordance to God's plan.
Absolutely not. It's in fact the exact opposite. Because Jesus came to set captives free. Okay? The system of the world is to
Enslave.
indenture and enslave. Okay? So you have two totally diametrically opposed powers at work here. One wants to set us free, and one wants to crush people.
Yeah.
So if you look at the problem today, you've got issues of they're trying to develop a digital passport.
Right.
Okay? You can't do anything unless you've got their system. You've got a problem of credit scores. If you're not a good citizen, you don't have a score that's
Rating.
good and all of this, then you will suffer the price of that. Because any time they can turn the tap off,
That's right.
okay? Then you have the issue of biometric data. They want to collect information, everybody, and centralize that information so that they can, if they control the money as well, they can shut you down and you can't eat tomorrow morning. If you're not a good citizen, if you're not a good, if you don't obey, what they want you to do and so on. Then you have issues of a central bank digital currency. Well, what is that? Lots of people don't understand. It sounds good, it sounds interesting, but they don't understand that if tomorrow you have a central, right now the banks are issuing money.
Correct.
Okay. So let me give you an example. You go to your bank, you borrow money to buy a house. The moment you've signed your signature on that note payable to the bank, you have created that money. Did you know that?
That's right.
It's a debt-based monetary system. And so from the moment that you have done that, the bank can now leverage it, can now play with it, can now do all kinds of things with it. You have empowered the system because you have now become a servant of a lender.
Right.
Okay? And you have allowed them to create the money that will now indenture you. And on top of that, they're going to lend it back to you at interest. They've created it out of thin air, but they're going to basically make interest on this. And it's compounded interest, so that it doesn't end. There's no end to compounding of interest. And then you got issues with like, central bank digital currency is basically the banks giving the control to the central bank.
Right.
And the central bank will now control the distribution of money.
The banking
So
system.
if at the very top they decide that they want to shut you down, they can target you. They can say, for instance, we don't like the fact you eat too much meat. Cut him off. But they may not cut you off. They may just make the pipe so small that you can't even feed your family anymore.
Yeah. There are
And
ways of doing that.
There are ways of doing that,
Yeah.
absolutely. CBDCs are programmable tokens.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean? That means that they can control you. They can decide how much you eat, how far you travel, which planes you go, how many times you go on vacation. If you eat too much chocolate, too much meat, too much fish, and they don't like it, you're in trouble. They can shut you down. It is programmable. That is the key to the whole thing. Once you understand that, you understand the issue. And then you have issues, all kinds of other issues. You've got climate change, you've got, AI, how they're trying to force AI, introduce AI. You've got, the development of a universal religion to replace a relationship with God.
Yeah.
You've got the destruction of the family. All of these are attacks on the system with the same root cause, money. Okay? And what I can tell you is my personal belief is that we are seeing today a judgment of God upon the monetary system of the world. And I can tell you that there's an hour of trial that is coming up on the world that there is nothing the elites can do to stop. Okay?
God cannot tolerate this anymore.
God will not tolerate
Will not
this
tolerate
anymore.
this.
I say this as very, very certain of what I'm speaking about. This is not a maybe. This is a done deal. The judgment is already there. So it's a question of time. But, we have to remember there's hope. We'll get to that in a little bit later.
Yeah, because after that scenario,
absolutely. Yeah.
we need that.
No. But the heart of the problem is the current financial system is based on debt, and that is very, very against what God has purposed. So ask yourself a question: if a monetary system today was of God, why would there be so much secrecy, so much illusion, and so on? Because
Or
God is
manipulation.
clear. Huh?
Manipulation.
Or manipulation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that alone should tell you this is not of God. Okay? And you've got deception, you've got illusion, you've got slavery, you've got usury, you've got poverty, you've got suffering. I mean, all of these things are not the plan of God for mankind. God's purpose for mankind is that we would be blessed, we would prosper, we would know Him, we would walk with Him, and we would experience what is called the social shalom of God, the peace of God. And we don't experience that today.
The shalom of God.
The shalom of God for communities. Absolutely.
And this is exactly reverse to what people are doing because they want to take control and power over men.
Correct. Exactly. Exactly.
All right.
They don't want us to return to God. And, there are some very interesting quotes that I would like to quote. James Garfield said, "Whoever controls the volume of money in any country is the absolute master of all industry and commerce." Okay?
Yeah.
And then you've got another one, which is by Mayer Amschel Bauer Rothschild. And that was in the 1700s. He said, "Give me the control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws." Now, think of that.
Yeah.
The arrogance of that. You can make all the laws you want, but as long as I have the power to issue money, I control you.
Yeah.
Okay?
That's correct.
And finally, the last one is Henry Ford. And this is really the heart of it. He said, "It is well that the people of a nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." Henry Ford.
It's something people probably, definitely will not appreciate if they were aware of it. And it's kept in secrecy while manipulation is taking place, largely because of the control of power through the control of money.
Correct.
Quite interesting.
Correct. In effect, what you have is, the way I see this, is that God's axe is at the root of a tree of money. He's taking it down.
All right. We're looking at the current state, which is quite scary and certainly unpleasant, and as you've said, is not in accordance to the will of God or the plan of God. Now, Alan, tell us, are we headed toward a catastrophic systemic collapse of the U.S. dollar and by extension the flat currency system of the entire world?
I believe we are indeed headed towards a systemic collapse of the entire system. It's unraveling very fast. I don't think they know how to stop it, to be quite frank. The issue we have to understand is that the dollar is the world reserve currency. Attached to the dollar is every other currency that are all fiat currencies based on thin air, okay? And so what you have is you have governments that are so borrowed up to here. I'll give you one example. The whole problem of Greece happened when Greece's GDP was at 119% of their borrowings were at 119% of their gross development product, okay? Today they are close to 200%, okay? And we think they solve the problem because we don't hear it in the news anymore.
Right.
That's not the case, okay? It's continued to compound. You look at the US. At the time, the US was at 89%. Today, the US is has surpassed the 119%. So where are we headed? It is a problem that will continue to compound and continue to compound and continue to compound forever, unless there is a stop to it. And what I find is that you have to now understand the global reserve currency. The reasons why we're facing what we're facing today is because the US dollar has been weaponized, okay? By this I mean that it has been used to impose upon other countries the will of one government. And either you obey or you do what we want, or else we're going to close the tap. That weaponization is the worst thing that could have been done, because it sends a message to everybody else in the world. It can happen to you as well, if you don't behave and you don't do what we want you to do.
And that's why they refer to it as a mighty US dollar.
Yes, right. That's exactly right. And so then you have the issue of the out of control of printing of money. You have then the fractional reserve banking. You have unlimited money printing. I'll give you one example. The US used to have a 10% reserve requirement.
Right.
That means that with 10, they could create 100 to lend. Do you know that they have now reduced that down to 0 2 years ago?
Yeah.
That means there is no more
nothing to base
accountability
anything
in the
from.
system.
Yeah.
You can issue as much as you want, and you will never be held accountable. That's what we're facing right now. And then you have issues of the emergence of bilateral agreements, like the BRICS. You know, China and Russia will trade together. They're not going to look to the dollar anymore. Well, then you have, all of a sudden, you've got now Saudi Arabia that says, we'll accept payments in anything else. If you know that the dollar is going to collapse, what would be the first thing you would do if you had reserves of oil? You'd say, I'm not going to sell it in US dollar.
You want a more stable
you want
and
something that's going to be
dependable.
more stable. But the problem is, which currency is stable? All of them are fiat currencies.
If it's anchored on the US dollar.
If it is not an asset-backed or gold-backed currency, you have nothing. It's printed out of thin air. It's worth nothing. It's time we say it's worth nothing.
Artificial value.
It's artificial value. It has value because we all accept it, but when we say no more, the music stops. It's over.
When you say we, you're
I'm talking about
pertaining
people.
exactly who? People.
People. People. If we around the table today, we say we will stop using this and we're going to move to something different, the whole thing collapses. And today, this is what you're finding. You're finding nations. I mean, for instance, there were more than 100 nations gathered in St. Petersburg that were saying we need a new system, we need a new currency, we need a new form of money, because this is not working. They see the handwriting on the wall. You got the president of Kenya, for instance, saying, you know, this is enough. Once you begin to research, you realize that there is a rebellion coming from the bottom up, from the nations, from the people, from everywhere, that is saying, we've got to do something about this.
Mm-hmm. And there's a solid a basis for this
Totally.
rebellion,
Totally.
so to speak.
Totally. You know, if you look at the total U.S. debt today, it is at $32 trillion, okay? And it continues to increase. It has increased more, for instance, in this current administration than it has in the past. And so with every administration that's coming in, you've got a bigger and bigger problem. And today we're looking at basically you have 161.61 trillion of deficit in the United States. How much and how do we cover that? It's covered by printing more money.
Now, having said that, what in your view have been the underlying and root causes of these periodic financial crises we've experienced during the last few decades?
Well, I think that you're dealing with the issue of a boom and bust issue, and it's very important to understand that just as you can create money out of thin air, you can also create liquidity shortage simply by manipulating the monetary system. Okay, that's what central banks can do. They can increase the money supply, they can decrease the money supply, they can raise interest rates, they can decrease interest rates.
They manipulate it.
Absolutely. All of these are techniques to increase or to decrease.
But what makes them do this? What's their, what's in it for them?
You have to understand this. And this is very important, because once you understand the concept of boom and bust, you say to yourself, well, why? Why would they do that?
Exactly.
And that's a good question, and everybody should be asking that. When you understand, for instance, that if I was to create, I could create a transaction, okay, where you've got a series of things that happen, and I'm going to create a financial product that will pay in 10 years a rate of return. So I have a yield to maturity on that financial instrument in 10 years. But if my investment is going to return to me, let's say, 3% more than what I am borrowing at, so I go to the bank and I borrow, let's say, at 3%, and I turn around and I invest that at 6% over 10 years. Do you know that delta between the 6 and the 3%, reduced down from a future value down to present value, will give me today, in one day, 17% interest profits, pure profits, okay, at the present value discounted to today. When you understand that, you understand that they make money every time it goes up and comes down, they make money.
Sure.
In fact, they make money, the greater the delta between the cost of money and the investment return, the more manipulative they can become with a monetary system, and the more money they make. So it's in their interest to make it go up and come down, make it go up and come down. But who pays the price at the end of the day? It's you and me.
Well, but never mind that.
It's the people.
Yeah.
They pay the price.
But for them, they earn more, they make more money for themselves.
Profits to their bottom line. Okay.
Don't they ever get enough?
Well, that's a very good question. Now you're entering a subject that's, you're dealing with the issue of greed, okay? And if you understand what the Bible says, greed is a bottomless pit. Okay?
Insatiable.
Insatiable. You cannot satiate greed. The more you have, the more you want. And that's the problem of the world today, is that it's entirely debt-driven and greed-driven. And so when you have these two problems, you got an economic treadmill, where you can now you have a division between the rich and the poor is going to continue to grow. The poor will get poorer and the rich will get richer, and it will continue to exacerbate the problem. And the more there is a division, the more they're going to try to control the population so that they don't rebel. That's the issue.
Yeah.
That's the heart of the issue.
And the bottom line is it's that greed
Greed.
that drives the collapse, the crisis, and eventually the collapse.
Yeah. But what is greed? Greed is saying whatever God gives me is not sufficient.
Never
Okay.
satisfied.
I'm never satisfied. Therefore, I will take care of my own destiny because I know what I need to live on. It's not what God has purpose for my life. It's what I believe I want. So at the root of that, of greed, is really a separation from God. We don't need God in our lives. We don't need His provision. We don't need His blessing. We don't need to hear from Him. We are self-sufficient. And as a result, you have a system that has become very arrogant. Very arrogant. And
Again.
that's the beginning of a fall,
Yeah.
right there.
Another deviation from
Absolutely.
God's original
Absolutely.
plan.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. Do you believe that, let me take a specific example, the 2008-2009 crisis that we went through, is that caused by the same factors?
Totally the same factors. Except there it was a little bit different. There you had the 2008 crisis began with the collapse of the mortgage. Mortgages became a problem. There was a lot of default on mortgages. It's what I was saying earlier about fractional banking. If you have, with 10 you've created 100, and 50% of what you've lent becomes a problem where they can't repay you, so how do you then keep your system continually growing? You have to create a bigger problem and a bigger problem, and therefore it's a never-ending issue.
Alan, during that period, central bankers had claimed that they had genuine alternatives to avoid a systemic collapse of the entire global financial system, first by providing a safer pathway for the world. Or do you believe that the solutions they were offering were simply palliative, temporary, band-aid solutions? And did they really address actual root causes of the problems?
No, I'm not aware of anybody who's actually dealing with root causes of a problem. They're all dealing with a band-aid solution. Okay? Let's take care of what we can today. Look at the Congress of the United States, for instance. I mean, every 3 months you've got a problem. They're out of money. They have to pass new budgets, new this, new that. They've achieved a debt ceiling. Well, every time they'll raise the debt ceiling. What's the problem? Because money is a debt instrument. Okay? So the only way you can create more money is you raise the debt instrument, the debt limit. So you raise the debt limit. Both parties are doing the same thing. Democrats, Republicans, what's the difference? They're all in the same boat. They all know nothing more what to do. And they are caught in a treadmill, and they can't come out of that treadmill.
And totally close their eyes to other consequences
Absolutely.
of what's happening.
Absolutely. And it requires a return to some very basic things, a return to God and to godly principles.
To give a specific example, Alan, do you believe that that back in 2008-2009 crisis, for instance, central bankers had genuine alternatives or offered genuine alternatives to avoid a systematic collapse of the entire global financial system by providing a safer pathway for the world? Or are these solutions offered simply palliatives or band-aid solutions and did not actually address the root causes?
No, it does not. Let me pose you a question. How do you stop a runaway freight train that's carrying 150, wagons? And the brakes we don't have any brakes anymore, and you have a runaway freight train coming downhill, and the station is waiting down there, and all the people on the quay. How do you stop it? It's in motion.
Yeah.
You can't stop it.
You can't.
You can't stop it. It will destroy the people, and there's only two ways you can attempt to derail that system. Is to deviate it, send it to some point where its collapse is not going to affect people's lives, or you blow it off completely. You actually destroy it before it kills the people at the station.
All right.
These are the only two options. So you don't have a third option here. because the system is too big, the beast has become too big, and you can't continue to feed that beast. It will destroy you. So that's basically, the best way I can explain this. How do you today deal with a 2.5 quadrillion exposure to credit derivatives?
It's there.
It is impossible. It's 25 to 30 times more than the entire global monetary system. How do you do that? How do you put the genie back in the bottle? You can't. It's out.
It's too big.
Yes, absolutely. So this is the problem we face today.
Okay. And these are deliberate, planned things that have been happening to the world.
Totally. I mean, there are things like the TARP system that came out in 2008, 2009. It was a joke, to be quite frank with you, because when you understand how the TARP system worked, it was actually the government money, actually people's money, that was being used to bail out the entire system. Then you have the QE1, the QE2, the QE3, and they continually print more and more and more money because they don't know what to do. It's like a little bit like the blind leading the blind. They're on a treadmill and they can't stop it.
Level with me, Ellen. Do you consider these planned events to actually, or are designed to actually destroy the world?
It's a very deep question you're asking me.
This could kill you.
No, they can't touch me, so
All right.
I have no worry about that. But the point is that when you understand what is behind all of this, it would make anybody very, very fearful. Okay? I can see very clearly what they're doing to try and enslave humanity, to try and control humanity, to try and take away from the people what God wants to give them, and to subjugate them, and to put them under the control of a cabal that is basically there to destroy the world. They're not here to bring healing, to bring blessing, to bring... That's not their business, not their purpose. Their purpose is that they are here to steal, kill, and destroy. That's what Satan does, okay? So once you understand that, and you understand that money is a root, not the root of all evil, but the love of money is the root of all evil.
That's right.
And that they love money, then you understand that you're dealing with evil. Okay. Once you understand that, then you have to understand what is a bigger agenda behind all of that. And now we come to the 2030 agenda of the United Nations, for instance. Do you know what this is about? Are you aware of the 2030 agenda? Well, let me give you the list. They're aiming towards a one world government. It's the end of a cash paper currency. They don't want you to have cash because they want to control you. They will centralize the control of money into central banks, one central bank of the world. Right now you have the BIS, which is the Bank of International Settlement, based in Basel, Switzerland. They control all the central banks of the world. And it's all centralized because they do the clearing between the central banks, clearing settlement between the central banks. So the entire power structure has been moved to the top. So they're talking about now a one world government in one world financial system controlled from the BIS and all the central banks. And they are looking to, in effect, be able to control populations and control the flow of money. And now at the lower level of the central banks, we are now talking about central digital currency. Well, we have been looking at every single white paper that the BIS has put out, okay, to understand what's behind this. These are complex documents, every single one of them. We've looked at them, we've studied them, we understand what they're doing, and we can see through it. What I can tell you is that the world is headed towards a centrally controlled one world currency. You won't see that, because what you will see is the currency of this nation, the currency of that nation, the currency of that nation, but actually it's entirely controlled from the top. They can control it, because the moment that they have a central bank digital currency here, you're in trouble. Okay, so they can control that.
All right, but I have to ask this. I mean, it's unification, it's centralization. How can that be bad? How can that destroy the world?
Well, you know, if you have to understand who controls who. Okay? If God is controlling the decision makers, you will have blessing.
No problem.
You will have prosperity.
Right.
You will have no scarcity. You will have people that will be flourishing in the place where God has planted them. On the other side, you will have despair, you will have slavery, you will have control, you will have people that will be exploited, and it is not for the purpose of God. So
And
I
that's a
ask you,
problem.
who's behind these people? Okay? That's the heart of, you understand that, you understand everything. And so, you know, it goes on, because now they're going to give you mandatory vaccines, they're going to give you microchips, where you can't buy and sell unless you have a microchip. They're headed towards the end of private transportation. You may not be able to go on vacation anymore, or take a plane trip, because carbon problems, global warming, which again is a made up, completely made up thing to foster an agenda. You have the end of private farms. Look what's happening in Holland.
Yeah.
They can't farm anymore. They have to give their farm to the government to stop because of
Land regulation.
absolutely.
Right.
And so what you have is all of these things are very, very deep. They appear to be disconnected, but they're all totally centralized and connected. And it has to do with money.
Very cunning. Very cunning. So that's redounds to actual world slavery, if you will. Now the question is, do you believe there is still time? Is it too late or impossible to save the situation, the sinking ship, if you will?
Maybe I can share with you here my spiritual vision of what's going on. And that I think is very important. In the book of Revelation, chapter 3, God speaks about the hour of trial that is going to come upon the whole world, not just this country or that country, the whole world. I believe we're at that time of the hour of trial, okay? And Scripture says it is to test the people. So what does that mean, test? Test the people for what? We have to understand that first of all, I must say that it is not too late, okay? It's too late for certain people, it's not too late for the majority of the people. Because what God is really saying is tugging at our heart, I want you to return to me. I want you to come under my blessing. I want you to know me. It is not about a monetary system. It is about who do we believe God is, and what do we want. How do we submit ourselves to His Lordship in our lives? That's the heart of the issue, okay? All of the rest is peripheral stuff. Once you have that centered, everything else will happen. And so what you have is I see what's going to happen now, is the test of the monetary system, the one world government, the global this, the global that, the agenda this, the agenda that, all of this is pointing to one thing alone. God is testing each one of our hearts. Will you trust me, or will you trust the system of the world? That's the heart of the issue. And so what we now have is this. There is going to be, by the way, a division. There will be a separation. There will be some that will say, you know, we believe that we have the answer. We know what the answers are. We know better.
Yeah.
Okay? They'll continue to build their Tower of Babel.
They claim that.
Okay?
Yeah.
Let them do that. There's nothing we can do for these people. I am only concerned about those that will come back and say, yes, we want to submit to the Lordship of Jesus Christ. We want to submit to God and His plan for humanity. We want to live differently, and we want to make a difference in the world. Okay? Once we do that, then we will be blessed, and there will be an absolute division between the two. One will experience what is the social shalom of God for humanity, and one will experience what is the curse of God.
Wouldn't it be difficult for the people of God to distinguish and recognize the difference between the two? I mean, I'm sure the proponents of each of one side even the one that leads the evil one, can be oh so cunning and so
Correct.
deceptive. Would it be difficult for somebody like me seeing both options and recognizing which is the real one?
Well, it is, and I think that it's a personal
Personal
issue.
decision.
It's a personal decision that every single human being has to make. Will I trust God in the midst of trials and tribulations? I have been tested in my life. I won't tell you the story of my life, but I've gone through, believe me, what I think is every possible testing, but I still find he has more testing for me. So I'm not at the end of it.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd agree with me, but I'd say, it's anchored on your personal relationship with God.
That is correct.
That will
Absolutely
guide you.
correct. Absolutely. It's the Holy Spirit inside that will drive you, that will direct you, that will organize the circumstances of your life so that you have a blessing. What I can tell you is my view is that the people that turn to God during these times will be protected, they will be blessed, they will be secure, they will have no fear, they will be absolutely under the shield and the protection of God in a way that they have maybe rarely experienced in their lives.
All right, but going back to the forthcoming or what would probably be an inevitable collapse of the monetary system, the thing that will save it is our hanging on to God.
Correct.
And believing that with Him nothing is impossible.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
You got it. And let's not forget what Thomas Jefferson said. It's very important. He said, resistance to tyrants is obedience to God. Therefore, we must resist with everything we have. So not only do we need to submit to God, but we must resist this evil, this pervasive evil. Let me add to what I just said and give you kind of a picture of the way I see things from a godly perspective. Think of God as being having all the blessing in the world. Okay, we have a tendency to understand wealth in a very different way than God does. If I ask most people what is wealth, they'll say to me, or I ask who is a wealthy man, they'll say Bill Gates or whoever, king of whatever. That is an illusion. It is an illusion of wealth. Because all true wealth comes directly from God. The rain that makes your crop grow, the seeds that will sprout to feed you, the blessing that comes with children. Children are a heritage from the Lord, so your children are a blessing from God.
Yeah.
The gold that is in the ground is a blessing from God. It comes from God. So wealth is always from top to bottom, never produce bottom up. We can accumulate the blessing of God based on wisdom, based on His blessing, based on so on. That's okay, because because we acknowledge it came from Him, and therefore we will be blessed with what we have, and we will prosper, and we will have abundance. And you go back in Scripture, and you find that like Jacob, God blessed him. He had his animals, and he multiplied it. Okay, that's the blessing of God. That's what we're missing today. Why are we missing it? Let's go to the root cause of the problem. What you have today is, let's think of a river. Okay, you have a source, and then you have people living all the way down the river, on both sides of the river, all the way down to the end. And what you have is God has purpose that that river will be enough. There will be enough water for everybody all the way down.
Right.
Okay. So what you have is the first guy, he builds a dam. Why a dam? Because he doesn't want to trust that God's provision will be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I'm going to prepare my future. I'm going to basically captivate what I need for tomorrow today. And so I will accumulate. I will accumulate. I will accumulate. But the next guy sees what the first one has done, he does the same thing. And the next one does the same thing, and so on and so on. So what you have is a river that is completely dried downstream. Okay? They have plenty, and they have nothing. They have trickles. And that's the problem we face today. So what is the answer to that? The answer to that is very simple. We have, every one of us, God wants us to have a vertical relationship with Him. And He says to us, I will bless you with so much that your hand will not be big enough to hold it. on one condition: you never do this. You never say, this is mine. Because if he has to pry your fingers open, as a woman by the name of, a wonderful woman of God by the name of Corrie ten Boom, she said, if God has to pry your finger open to get what he has put into your hands, it will hurt. So don't, hold it very loosely. And I think she was very wise in her statement. So the blessing of God is vertical, and he will put into our hands more than we need and more than we can handle. Why? Because in so doing, he will demonstrate that he's God. And then what happens is he requires of us to be like him, lavish givers. He wants me to have an open hand. Not only that, but he's given me 5 fingers. That finger, if there's a need here, meet it. Because you know me. Meet it. And watch what I will do. And if there's a need there, meet it. And you will see what I will do. And so the blessing of God will flow from open hands to open hands to open hands to open hands, and an entire community will be blessed. Because what will happen is everyone who receives will know that it's the obedience of a first person to God that has blessed him. And he will do the same, and he will do the same, and he will do the same. So that's what I call the social shalom of God, the blessing of God. It will multiply by itself, and it will be a blessing to all.
It's a principle of sharing and caring.
Absolutely.
And therefore, there's no room for greed and selfishness.
Correct. And by the way, in the kingdom of God, there is no such thing as scarcity. Okay?
Always abundance.
Always abundance.
Very interesting. Now, do you believe that fractional reserve banking that you did mention earlier on is actually a Ponzi scheme?
Yes. Short answer, yes. You have to understand that if I had a car dealership, for instance, that produced more cars, that produced more paper contracts, for instance, than what I have cars to sell at any one time.
More sales than you can produce.
That's right, that I can produce. And I simply sign a promise of future delivery of a contract. And I know today that I don't have, the cars to back up my dealership. I don't have the cars. It will be called a fraud.
Yes.
When the time comes to deliver the car, I can't. It will be a fraud.
Yep.
Okay. Well, Washington and Wall Street is the only place where it's encouraged. You are a champion if you manage to, leverage the system and do this and do that and all of that and exploit it. And thirdly, it's the only place where it is protected also by law.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Who's going to sue?
Absolutely, absolutely. It is, in my opinion, the biggest Ponzi scheme ever, and mark my words, ever conceived, devised, and implemented under the cover of governments of the world. And it's time to stop. God is saying no more. No more.
Yeah.
It will stop.
It's institutionalized deception.
Institutionalized fraud. Let's call it that way.
And certainly against God's will, right?
Absolutely. So we need to return, if we want to know what the solutions are, we need to return to a system where for every $1 that you have that you're going to be lending, you have that in reserve. So you cannot continually leverage as we've done. But there are some interesting quotes that President Woodrow Wilson said, for instance, before signing the Federal Reserve Act. He said this, apparently under duress, by the way. He said, a great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated into the hands of few men. Yeah. We have come to be one of the world's worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the world. No longer a government of free opinion, no longer a government of conviction and vote of a majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of small groups of dominant men. Wow.
By sheer numbers, it's a tyranny of the minority.
Absolutely. This was in 1913.
Right.
What has changed? 110 years later, what has changed? It's like it was written for yesterday. And there's another quote that the Rothschild brothers said, which is very very insightful, because once you understand that, you understand the root cause of the problem. He said this: the few who understand the system, and now he's referring to the complexity of a financial system, fractional reserve banking, compounded interest, and all that kind of stuff. And he's saying the few who understand that will either be so interested from its profits and so dependent on its favors that there will be no opposition from that class. So we have free reign, because they will never fight us, they will be behind us the whole way. Greed.
Self-interest.
Self-interest, greed. Yep.
Now, educate me, sir. What is the difference between currency and real money?
Currency, and the difference between currency and real money is that money, you have three types of money. You have money that has intrinsic value, and therefore it is a commodity-based money, for instance, gold. You have a fiat currency, fiat monetary system, which is based on nothing behind it, and then you have a representation of money. For instance, if I say that money is worth what that bottle is worth, it will be a representative currency. So you've got three different types of money. Currency is principally what is a fiat currency. Okay, it has nothing behind it. It is thin air. It is based on the good faith and credit of the issuer. Well, not even a guarantee, because if I have $100 bill and I go to cash a $100 bill or peso or whatever you want to call it, and you say, I want to redeem my $100, what are we going to do? You're going to exchange serial number 1 by serial number 2. And you'll walk in with a $100 bill, you'll walk out with a $100 bill. They'll say, we've redeemed your $100 bill. So they've simply replaced the serial number.
All right, okay.
Okay, that's all it is. So it is entirely based on a fictitious system. You can't say, like gold, here is my asset and I walk out with the gold. Or I walk out with the value that gold represents. You can't do that. What we need to understand is this, with currency. The system of the world has attempted to make the value of gold dependent on, for instance, the US dollar. Okay? But if you can manipulate that, then you have an issue with you're manipulating the intrinsic value of gold. Okay? And remember what I just said, intrinsic value is because God has given it value. That's the heart of the issue. So if you can manipulate gold, you can manipulate God, technically. The difficulty we face with this entire system is that you have what I would call the on-ramp and the off-ramp to ownership of gold. So when you buy gold, you're buying it in US dollar.
Right.
When you sell gold, you're receiving US dollar. So as long as you've got the dollar on both sides of a pillar of the exchange, you can control what's in the middle. That's the heart of the issue. But then on top of that, that same dollar is what's actually driving the market on top of the gold. So when you've got these three things that are operating together, you can manipulate the price of gold. And so the issue we face today is that currencies made by men is attempting to control the price of gold, which is God-given.
Intrinsic value.
Intrinsic value. That's the heart of the problem.
That's a problem.
It is.
Because this is, again, it's very directly related to both, to the difference between man-controlled and God-controlled.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely correct.
All right. Alan, why do you believe that central banks of the world seem to be rushing to create their own CBDCs, the digital currencies? What do you think is prompting them to do this?
Well, they have to rush. They don't have time.
Uh-huh.
They have very little time left before everything collapses. It's a house of cards. Okay, they know the wind is getting stronger and that house of cards is going to blow away. So they have to hurry and get that done. Plus, they've got a lot of different agenda items they want to accomplish. which we talked about
The
already
UN,
before,
yeah.
the UN
Plan, centralization
2030
plan.
agenda and so on,
Right.
to become a one world government and so on. So all of this is accelerating at a very rapid pace. They're not even concerned anymore about the visibility of that or what people may think. They're rushing to finish an agenda, and therefore they are putting every effort possible to finish now this centralization process through the CBDC, because what they want is they want every central bank of the world to have their own CBDC, and then they will connect that at the top, and once that connection is made, the whole world is under their control.
That's part of the whole
That's
infrastructure.
part of the whole infrastructure that's behind it.
So that's why digital is important.
Yes, that's why the digital currency, because taking the control away from the banks for issuing money, put it into the hands of government, and then from there being able to control it through their central banks. That's the heart of the issue.
And that's part of taking control of the population as well,
Correct.
of the world. Are we seeing that there's a grand plan behind this move towards digital currencies? There a move towards changing, the cash as we do it today
Absolutely.
to digital currency.
Totally.
Why is that important?
Well, it's important because if you have cash, you're not accountable to them. Okay, they can't track what you do with your cash. If you want to go and spend money, you take
can't
it out of
hold
your
you.
pocket, you exchange it at a local level. They don't have any control over that. That's the heart of the issue. They want to be able to control what you spend, how you spend it, for what purpose you spend, who receives it, where it comes from, and they want to be able to track all of this forever. Okay?
So it's a means for the control that they desire.
The purpose of it is the control of people through the monetary system.
All right. And why do you believe that a debt-based system of banking will eventually, or if it's not already doing that, have a catastrophic ending to the world unless there's an urgent thing that we can do?
Well, absolutely. It will end up in a catastrophe because the whole thing is collapsing, and so we have to be able to intervene and take action. And that's at an individual level. Every single person in the world can take action.
Collectively?
Collectively. Individually and collectively.
Okay.
Absolutely. For instance,
Okay.
you can say, I'm going to basically talk to my friends about what the issue is. I'm going to take action. I'm not going to accept their CBDC currency. I'm not going to accept to have an account that's digital. I refuse. And as long as enough people stand up and say, no, we will not submit to that, then you will have a pressure that will build up from the bottoms up. Remember that at the heart of the issue, what they are trying to control is the sovereignty that God has given us, you and me and every individual in the world. We are sovereign before God. It's not that a nation is sovereign, it's that we, individuals, are sovereign before God. We have a right to choose how we live, what we do with what God gives us, with our decisions. We're free even to reject Him if we want. That's how free He made us. And that's the freedom they want to take away from us. They do not want us to have that freedom.
With
that
a
God has
controlled
given us.
system, that subverts the sovereignty that
Correct.
we're supposed to be
That is correct.
innate to us.
Absolutely.
Okay, okay. All right, we have recently seen a proliferation of alternative currencies, different currencies. How does, let's bring this a little closer to home. Global Gold Monetary Fund. How does GGMF compare with these other alternatives? Does it have benefits or advantages that it has to offer that other alternatives do not?
The very first difference is that we're returning to a gold system that is under God. We acknowledge upfront that this is under God. The gold belongs to Him. What He transmits to us to use for the blessing of humanity is His. So we acknowledge that in everything we do from the very beginning of the GGMF system. That has been the foundational pillar of everything we do. it is the cornerstone upon which we built the entire organization. It's recognizing God's sovereignty over that currency. And not currency, that money. I apologize. That's my mistake. It's not a currency. It's
money.
It's a money of gold that derives its value, that has intrinsic value because it is from God, by God, and for God.
It's not representative. It's
No.
a real value there.
Correct. And we're returning to the intrinsic value of money, of gold, and we're returning to into a system that acknowledges God's control over us. Okay? And once we have done that, we then will experience what it means to be a nation under God.
Alan, what does that mean in terms of stability, security, safety?
You have far more safety in being under God than being under a system
Than
that
anything
is.
else, for that matter.
That's right. That's absolutely.
And stable.
It is totally stable. The currency will retain its value long term. You will have interest rates that have been fixed, that will be fixed for a period of jubilee, 50 years. Exchange rates will be fixed over 50 years. You return to a standard where gold is no longer going to be used to manipulate as a speculative investment and to control. You're going to return to gold as a utility, not as an instrument to make money with. Okay?
Yeah.
And its purpose is that God gives us the gold so that you and I can barter, we can trade. You make shoes, I need shoes, I cook meals, you need to eat. So between us, we're going to exchange God's currency.
So that's the essence of
That's the essence of it.
global gold
That is
monetary
the
fund.
essence of it.
All right,
Now
then
it's
we'll
far
talk
more
about-
complex,
yeah,
and we're
yeah.
going to cover that in part 2.
Right,
okay?
right. There are more
But it's
details to come.
More details to come.
All right,
but
so-
this is a complex issue, and we've dealt with all of these issues. But the central thing is we return to God.
All right.
And,
Can't wait.
and by the way, it's not a return to a gold standard. It's a return to God. And the gold is the benefit that comes with a return to God.
Okay, it's founded on our going back
Correct.
to God.
Now, we can't force everybody to go back to God. That's not our job. Our only job is to say, this is the solution. You either accept it or you reject it. That's your business between you and God. We have nothing to do with that. But here is a solution. Here is what the provision God has given us. And here is the blessing that He has made available.
Your mission is to send out the message out there,
Absolutely.
but not to impose on anyone.
Not to impose on anyone.
All right.
We're free to choose.
The essence of free will
Absolutely.
comes in,
Absolutely.
which is also part of God's plan.
Correct.
All right. As we are preparing for the second phase where we talk about the Global Gold Monetary Fund, let me ask this. How can GGMF thrive and prosper on its own without any reference to a conventional fiat currency?
The first thing we have to understand is that we have made this new monetary system holy to Yahweh.
Holy to Yahweh.
Holy to Yahweh. Okay? That means that it derives its worth because of the intrinsic value that God will give it. The gold belongs to God. We acknowledge that the gold belongs to God. It doesn't belong to us. We're not here a profit-making organization. We're not here to sell gold. We're here to take what belongs to God, distribute it. That's it. We're not selling the gold. We're distributing the units that God has given us. He gave us the gold, therefore we are able now to multiply the blessing unto people. So our job is not to profit from it. Our job is not to simply be obedient to what God is asking us to do. For us, it's a mission. For our group, it's a mission. It's not a job. It's not a business. It's not a crypto. It's
Profit
not
center.
nothing.
Yeah.
It simply is, if we don't do this, there is no one else that can do it. And if God has called us, then we will fulfill what He's calling for our lives. So that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you have to understand that, if we return to gold, we return to an intrinsic value. We return to a store of value. We return to a medium of exchange that will be acceptable. We return to a stable system that can be blessed and can cause communities to thrive. And we will experience the social shalom of God. And so we have to understand that the gift is going to be from God. He may give to you more than he gives to the next person. Or he may give you less than to the next person. But that's not the issue.
Yeah.
The issue is when you place your trust in him, all your needs will be met. That's the key. We make it his responsibility to meet our needs, not our want, our needs. And so by returning to God, we return to something that is pleasing to him and that will allow his blessing to flow to humanity. That's what we need in the world today. And so in that there is great hope. This is not a hopeless situation. This is a wonderful opportunity for those that are prepared to trust God to walk that path of saying, Lord, I submit to you. It's about you, it's about your purpose. And I want that. And the moment you do that, watch what will happen.
Doing things in accordance to God's will, and all things turn out for the good.
Amen.
All
Amen.
right, and what's important thing here in this interview, this first phase of the interview, is that there is hope. No matter how scary, how seemingly catastrophic the present situation is. So hang on, folks, because we will be discussing more about the Global Gold Monetary Fund on the second phase of this interview with our good friend, Sir Alan.